Hello and welcome to Embracing Your Season. I'm your host, Paige Clingenpeel. We have another awesome interview for you today. In fact, this gentleman is my friend, and I love that you get a chance to hear his story, to listen about his resources that he has for you, for all those people. His name is Robert Beeson. So he is the founder of Solo Parent Society, and he founded this in 2017. But let me tell you, he has lived this life for many, many years with his $3. He was a solo parent, and so he's taking all his wisdom and he's providing it for all the people that can benefit from that through podcasts. He wrote a book and he has resources that abounds. But prior to this gentleman, maybe you're familiar with Jars of Clay, Plum. Yes, he was the founder of Essential Records, and he's the former senior vice president of Sony in Providence. But Guy got a hold of his heart and led him down this path of starting an organization, which is how I met him, called iShine. You can still, I think, find those shows on TBN presently today. It is a Christian tween media company, and it serves the world. You can check it out. It's some pretty cool stuff. I know that my kids enjoyed it when I was on that show before. Today, though, we're going to be talking about solo parents and how we can come alongside them, and those that are living that life, ways that we can support you and live through that through the community that Robert Beeson and his organization can provide. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody. I am just so excited to have Robert on the show today. Robert Beeson, thank you for being here.
It's awesome to be here. It's good to see you again, Paige.
So one of the fun things that you and I have experienced is I was on your show for iShine way back in the day. I was a host, and it was my first time being like on TV. There was first off, you were so gracious to me. Thank you for that. But there was a funny story that I remember when, and maybe you recall this, we had to do at the end of taping the host portion, a flyby. The camera had to fly by, and we that were on the show that day had to like wave or smile and all of this stuff. And I felt so awkward. I grimaced and I waved, and you guys started laughing so hard. I was like, was it that bad? Was it awful?
No, I totally remember that. I mean, when you're not used to doing that, and like you're asked to do something that will feel natural for the viewer, but behind the scenes it feels like the most unnatural because you're not waving to people, you're waving to this big machine.
I know. So, yeah. No, oh my gosh. But again, you were so gracious to me, so I appreciate that. But in that time I got to know your story and your testimony and now I have seen, since we've been friends for over 8 years, maybe even a decade now, that God is just doing some amazing things. So let's start with that. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and where you came from and where you are now?
Sure. So I won't start on my childhood. I'll just say this. I was raised as a missionary kid, so it wasn't a normal upbringing to begin with. I lived in Africa. When I came back to the States, my parents split up. And so I told myself, I did my best to kind of hide and numb out in busyness. I didn't want to ever depend on anyone ever again because I felt brokenhearted. And so I just got into business, and a long story short, I created a record company out in California, and a Christian record company, because I had a lot of contacts in the music business. I was involved in the California music scene, Christian music scene. And so started the company out there and then sold it to a company back here in Nashville, which is where I live now. Moved back here. Shortly after moving back here, I got married, and we had 3 kids. And I was living a pretty reckless life, even though it was the Christian music industry. Growing up in Africa did not afford me a lot of the things that American culture affords Americans. Mm-hmm. And the word afford is as loose, because I think it also can cripple us, and that is. With all the exposure to media, with all the luxuries, with all, like when in Africa, where I lived first, there was no phones, there was no radio, there was no, we had rainwater. So it was just, in retrospect, now that I look back, it was an amazing life because it forced you to be creative and forced you to come up with things. Wow. But at the time, I felt like I was really doing without a lot of the things that normal kids in America dealt with. So when things started working with the record company, we had some success pretty quickly. I just indulged in every bit of what I felt like I had missed out on. I started partying hard, and I'll tell you this, that it wasn't like I didn't do any of the big, like you couldn't point the finger at me and say, look what a reckless person, what a, he's sleeping around or he's doing anything like that. But I was just absolutely living hard and enjoying all the perks that come with Grammys and platinum and whatever records. And so I was not really a connected parent, although from the outside, I think you could say that I looked like I was pretty present. But really, the record company and the music industry was kind of like my family. And so as a result of that, my wife of 13 years started developing some habits of her own that were destructive and created an addictive lifestyle. And eventually, that addiction got the best of her. And in 2007, she left me and my three girls, who were 9, 7, and 4 at the time. And so I was thrust into being a single parent. And I'll also say that 3 months prior to my wife leaving me, I had left Sony Music, which was the parent company that I was an executive at. So I went from having all this around me, success and what would be deemed as success, to having no job. Wife walks out, and I'm raising 3 girls on my own. And so that kind of started my trajectory of being what I call a solo parent. And Paige, you know this because we've talked, but for those listening, those were some of the hardest years of my life, the hardest season. But it was by far the most important thing to ever happen to me. When the rug is ripped out from underneath you, and you're left with just bare bones, that's where I think transformation really starts to take place. So I'm grateful for that season. I wouldn't have wished it on anybody, but what happened in me started pointing me in the direction of getting my own health, starting to be a more present dad. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I had sole custody of my 3 girls at the time. So for 8.5 years, I raised them completely on my own, with just sole custody. And one of the things that I realized in that season is I looked for resources for single parents, and I couldn't find any. There was just nothing out there. And especially from a faith perspective, I don't mean this to be an indictment of the church, but I think the church cares. The church universal cares about single parents. I just don't think they really know what to do. And so I kind of determined in my mind that I was going to, once I got some of my own health, that I was going to try to create some resources, or at least pull together, curate some resources. And during that season, I had the distinct privilege of starting another organization, a media company, which is where you and I met, Paige, and that was called iShine. But it actually was born out of me wanting to be able to do something with my girls. And so it was kind of like a faith-based Disney. We had a TV show, we had teen artists, we had a record company. It was just kind of trying to do something for tweens. And so in that season is where you came along and did a great job hosting there was 6 episodes, I think, right?
Yeah,
like
there was.
So that was a great season of my life. But once my kids had kind of grown past that season, it was not that I didn't really want to do it anymore. It was more that God was really birthing something in my life that was more related to solo parents. And so what I had determined that I wanted to do in my single solo parent season was now actually getting some traction. Because during this solo parent season, I was blogging and vlogging and just kind of recording mistakes I was making, things that were going okay. And that eventually turned into a book, which came out with Focus on the Family a few years ago. And I started a nonprofit called Solo Parent, and we do support groups for single parents. We have books. We have a podcast that comes out every single week. We have daily devotions. And it's been amazing to see the doors that God has opened. We've impacted about 215,000 families now.
Wow, that's incredible.
Branching the military. I've been back and forth to the Pentagon this year, developing resources for the armed forces. They have no support for single parents in the military. Now there is support for the single parents in the military. And so it's just been incredible, the journey that I've been on. God has really gone before me.
Wow. And just the wraparound for people that aren't in that season of raising kiddos on their own, I don't think that they understand the degree that is so necessary to have community around you. So speak to that. Educate those that are in a marriage maybe, but those that need to hear about your resources. Like, how can you support them? What do you find is like the number one, number two things that you need to be supported in that season?
So it's a great question. The number one thing that I hear from single parents, especially ones that have found us and have been in our program for a while, they say almost universally across the board, I finally feel like I'm seen and I'm heard and I belong. One of the primary things that a single parent deals with is feeling completely isolated. When your friend groups splinter because, some side with one side and others just feel awkward, you don't feel like you fit in your friend group anymore. You don't necessarily feel like you fit in a church anymore. It's hard going to church as a single parent, walking in with your kids, and you just can feel the weight of people going, I wonder what the story is there. So research has been done that Pew Research came out. I believe it's close to 70%. I think it's 67% of single parents don't attend church anymore. And the number one and two reason is they feel judged and they feel like they don't belong.
Man. Wow.
And so one of our primary things that we do at Solo Parent is create community. So we have online support groups that meet 7 days a week. We have 40 leaders around the country that lead those groups. And then we have in-person groups where people get together. We architect discussion. It's more like, it's not teaching like fixing single parents. It's more like saying you have a place to belong where you can actually embrace the struggle and realize that God uses those things to transform us. I think a lot of times the church jumps into a role of like, well, we've got to have all the right answers. And look, divorce, death of a spouse, unplanned pregnancy, actually anything in life, it's messy. And so stepping into that mess with other people, with single parents, is probably the number one thing that you can do. It's not about having all the answers. It's about being with someone. And after all, that's the message of the gospel, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're messy. Then Emmanuel shows up, God with us. He didn't come in and do, PowerPoint and sermons. He joined the human race. He joined with us. And so that's what we endeavor to do with single parents. And I think it's what we're all called to do.
Oh, absolutely. Gosh, I love that. And to be seen, to be known, but to be supported in this season, non-judgment, like it's just wraparound, right? So speak to those that are the single parent. There has to be tons of chaos managing it all. They're probably working, they're taking care of their kiddos. Like, what are some suggestions to find peace in that season where it is just chaos?
Well, again, the number one thing is don't do it alone. You've got to find a support network of people that can share the load. That doesn't mean that they necessarily pick up your kids all the time or whatever, but just don't try to do this alone. One thing that keeps single parents isolated is feeling like they have to act like they've got it all together. They already feel kind of embarrassed because they fail to keep in a marriage together. At least that's the way they perceive it. And so they don't want to lead with the need that they have. They want to appear like they have it together. And so for those single parents that might be listening, I would recommend come to Solo Parent, and it's free. It's not there's no fee, and join the groups. And so you can be seen and known and heard. For those of your audience that are not single parents, but they know a single parent, because 34% of households in America are single parents. Every one of us touch a single parent in some way. I want to say a couple things. First thing I want to say is they're struggling more than they appear to be. And that does not mean that they are weak. It means that they have a tremendous amount of chaos that they're dealing with. So be aware that even though they might present like they've got it all together, there's a part of their life that is in chaos. I mean, it's just so overwhelming being a single parent. Second thing I'd say is then reach out and offer to help in any way. But the way you do that is really important. Instead of going, I feel so sorry for you, you can't keep your grass mowed or whatever, like not the sympathy vote, but more, man, I don't know how you're doing what you're doing. I'm so inspired by your story. If you would allow me to be a part of that, I would love to be. I would just love to help however I can. Two very different approaches meeting the same need. One says, I feel so sorry for you, you're less than me, I can reach down to you. The other is saying, I'm honoring you for the strength that you're already showing. So I would just, I mean, those two things. There's so many things that a single parent can do to find peace. I mean, self care is a really important piece of it, and that it looks different for everybody. But we deal with that. So in our groups and in our podcast, every single week we take a different theme and a different topic. So for the month of, I think November is right now where we're recording this. We're in contentment, and so each week we deal with a different facet of contentment. We love is February, and so each week we deal with a different component. And so we have a lot of resources now out there for single parents, and it's again the model is not like, well, we're going to heap on stuff for you to feel even less about yourself. It's more about, no, we've learned some things along the way, and we've had some amazing guests on our podcast, and there's a lot of resources out there.
That's awesome. No, and I love that the whole, we don't want your pity, right? We just need your assist. Like it would be so great if you just helped us out, right? I love that mentality, and that's the way we should be as a community. That's the way Jesus designed community, and that's the way we should live it out as well. It is gospel centered. Okay, so let's talk. This is an interesting question, because it talks about those that are still married, but they are in a toxic relationship. It is unhealthy. It is not, it's a borderline abusive. It's just not healthy for the kids. But sometimes parents tend to stay in those relationships because they think it's better to have both parents in the house. So speak to maybe that person that's considering maybe getting a divorce, walking away for the health of their kiddos, but have that fear of that stigma, divorce, being a single parent. Can you speak to any of those things?
Yeah, I can totally relate to that feeling, because I was that guy that when my wife started developing addiction issues and mental health issues, I felt so guilty because of the way I had lived and kind of created the bed that we were laying in, that I stayed too long. And my girls saw more than they should have. I want to be careful as I'm saying this, because divorce is really difficult. Mm-hmm. Divorce is really, really hard. And I would not flippantly say to anybody that if they just are uncomfortable with a relationship, or I just married the wrong person, divorce should not be taken lightly at all. But there are justifiable reasons for divorce. The Bible talks about them. But those things that are toxic, that are below the surface, that nobody else might know of, is very, very common. And I'd say a large part of our solo parent community would admit having stayed in a relationship longer than they probably should have, and letting it kind of implode. I know that thinking about being a single parent can feel so overwhelming and daunting, but so is sustaining a toxic relationship.
Sure, yeah.
The health of our kids, it really is dependent on us taking care of ourselves first. And so if we can't take care of ourselves in a relationship that is toxic, abusive, addictive, whatever, I mean, there's a list of things. Not uncomfortable. I'm not just saying uncomfortable, but if there's really things that are preventing us from getting health ourselves, that is a good sign that, like, you know what, this is affecting our children. And not only is it affecting our children from just kind of what they're witness to, you're also modeling staying in a situation that is unhealthy for them. And our kids need to know that there are times when it's important to stand up for yourself and to say, I'm sorry, I'm out. I may still love you, the other person, but I can't continue to devalue myself and be in this situation, because God, ultimately, we're created in God's image, and we're only as good as we are able to take care of ourselves. And so sometimes we have to make the difficult decisions, not only for ourselves and our health, but our kids' health, and what we're teaching our kids about staying in a situation that's not healthy. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's wonderful. I love the modeling aspect of that as well, is that kids sometimes, well, I mean, it's statistically seen that we tend to marry what our parents demonstrated, right? Those are the ways that we communicate. That's how we interact with one another. I know that I'm a product of that as well. And I just want to break that generationally, right? We need to break this generationally and create something new in our homes with our kids, the way we parent, and even in our marriage. And sometimes, yeah, that takes a lot of community, a lot of mental health, therapy work, and just self-care, as you indicated. So yeah, I love the modeling piece of
One
that.
of this age, because I think this is really important that we don't take divorce lightly. Put yourself, an exercise that I kind of have adopted and share with others is, if you have your child, if you look at your child, and let's put your child in the position that you are currently in a toxic relationship. Would you
Ooh,
tell your child to get out, or would you tell your child to stay in?
yeah, game changer.
That is what you need to look at. You need to value yourself as someone that is worth protecting. And if you say no, I would tell my child to stick in there. It's just a little bit, then stay with it. But I would imagine if you are in a place where you're actually asking that question, it's probably a good indication of that there's some bad toxic things going on. And the second thing I would also say, with that model of looking at how to make that decision, bring someone else into the conversation and ask them to mirror back to you the way they see it, and fully disclose everything that's going on. So I just wanted to add that.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. So let's go into raising our kiddos as a single parent. So you had the blessing of three daughters in your home as a father. So speak to those that maybe are raising the opposite gender, like moms and sons, and then dads and daughters. Like, how do you speak into that a little bit for them?
Yeah, that's another great question, because it is typically, and it's not either or. Sometimes, I mean, it could be a mixed bag, right? You
Sure.
have a boy
Yep.
and a girl, kind of thing. I had three girls. Um, Again, and I think this is a reoccurring thing. Don't try to do it on your own. We're putting out a book as an organization, called Mom and Dad: How God Fathers Through Single Mothers, and the author is one of our key contributors. But we dive into this, and we've got another one that's going to come after that, which is raising daughters. But I think the main thing is to go. You don't have to be everything. Don't try to fill the role of both parents. It's impossible to do that.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we put the pressure and expectation on ourselves that we're going to have to be the perfect mom to a boy, and in the sense that we're going to be man enough to be that. There are just some things that are inherently going to, that are not going to be your gifting or your biological makeup. So I think step into that and take some pressure off yourself. And then the second part of that is, find healthy role models that are of that gender. I was fortunate to have a lot of great women that were around me that loved my girls and could handle those serious conversations, and even the just dramatic conversations.
Surely not with three girls.
Right? So yeah, I would just say, just don't try to do it alone. Take some pressure off you trying to fill both of those roles of mom and dad. You're not capable of doing it. You were never meant to do that. I don't believe God created us to raise kids on our own. That's not the intended design, but it can happen in community if you're surrounded by other people that play those roles.
And I would also say people that are married, like in my relationship with my husband, and he is a phenomenal man, but he usually takes those harder conversations, said, well, you're the counselor. Why don't you have those conversations? I'm like, dude, no, we're supposed to do this together. But our compromise is that we've been inviting trusted adults, role models, right, into those conversations with my kids as well, so that they're still getting the holistic stuff at home, but they're also getting it from other people outside of that. So that's regardless across the board. That's just good for our kids. That's wisdom.
Absolutely. Well said.
With dating, I know single parents sometimes that they want that companionship again, and maybe someone comes along their path, and so there's that navigating being a single parent, but then also dating. And I know that you've had success. You've gone on and married your beautiful bride, and now
Yeah.
you're a blended family. But speak to those people that maybe are considering dating or fearful of even dating and taking that next step.
Yeah, that's one of the trickiest things to navigate, because it looks different for everybody. I would say the most important component of it is I wouldn't date until you felt like you, I want to be careful how I say this, you don't need another person to complete you, that you are whole in the sense that there's not a big piece of you that's missing without someone else in your life. Like when I got married again, first of all, I did this wrong and I did it right. First time I started dating, there was this younger woman that worked at a coffee shop, and it fed my ego because she gave me lots of attention, and we didn't really date, but it was more than just friends, and it was good for my ego, but it wasn't going anywhere. And it was just I believe with all my heart that dating prematurely prolongs the suffering, prolongs the development, prolongs the healing. As only I believe God can repair some of these areas of our lives, and also it's also a time to the single parent life is a time to be reflective on our own stuff, because not only is it like what is going to fit my life and what am I looking for, but what am I bringing to the table, because we've got a lot of baggage that we've got to kind of offload and deal with. And I mean, for me, I had a lot of destructive patterns that I had to undo prior to even think I had the right to step into the arena. So it's not just about what meets your needs. It's also about what are you bringing to the table. And then the second thing, what I determined, for me at least, I'm married again, and we've been married for 9 years now. I didn't date for 8.5. So I took a long time. And when I eventually looked into dating again, what was most important to me was direction of life. Like, what do you want, rather than like, what am I attracted to? And that doesn't. My wife is very attractive, and I'm attracted to her. I mean, it's all that's great, and there has to be chemistry. There has to be that, but you have to think about it like this. Like, if you're a single parent, you're not making a decision for yourself anymore. Your train is already on the tracks, and it's going down. It's going down the rails. And so the best that you can hope for is merging with someone that's going in the same direction, rather than just like, I think we're compatible, I think we're this and that. I mean, you've got to be going in the same direction, because you're dragging some passengers along too. So that's what I did. And frankly, my wife, who I love dearly, probably wouldn't have been someone that I would have dated. Well, first of all, we weren't in the same circles, but she's not like me. A lot of times we look for people that are like us, but I started valuing different things. So that's. But again, there's no one size fits all. What am I ready to? What am I not? There's so many things. We actually have a couple of really good podcasts that we dive into that.
Oh, good.
It's hard to answer that in a soundbite, but yeah, I think direction is most important.
Yeah, that's good. And I love the fact that you even pointed out, it's not just you. You're bringing along these kiddos. And so that then brings up the questions of, like, when do I introduce my kids to this person? Like, when do I know that this is the right person? And then how do you navigate that and move on? Even if your ex-spouse is in the picture, how do you have those conversations? So I'm sure, again, your resources speak to all that. And so let's talk about that. Where can they find your book? Where can they find your resources? How can they find all of your good stuff?
Everything we have is at our website, soloparent.org. We also have an app that you can download. Any app platform, you just look for Solo Parent, and it has access to everything from the podcast to daily devotions to blogs to our online groups. You can find a group 7 days a week, and you can actually just join from your phone. So that's all on our app, Solo Parent app.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, thank you again so much for joining us today and sharing this pieces of wisdom for all of us, not only just single parents, but those that can walk alongside single parents, whatever season that they're in as well. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
And those that are listening, thanks again for tuning in. Check us out next week as we continue to have amazing conversations with experts and guests talking about embracing your season. Thanks for tuning back in for Paige's Takeaways. Now, I know that you've enjoyed this conversation from Robert Beeson. So these are some of the things that I think he would want you to remember, as well as to apply today to your own life. And best news here. This isn't just for solo parents. This is for all of us. We can take away this information and again, change and embrace it and be encouraged by it. So the first point that he pointed out was that we all need to be seen. We all need to be known. We need to be supported in a community. And so if you are looking for a community, not only can you find that as solo parents, but maybe you can find that in your church. Maybe you can find that with your neighbors. But recognize that there is a need intrinsically that we have to have a support system and community around us because we are designed to be known, to be seen, and to be loved. So that's the first point. Second one. Recognize that your child needs you to be healthy. That is the best part of modeling for our kids is they see how we self-care. They see how we have boundaries. If we're in a toxic relationship and we are modeling that for our kids, and that's not necessarily just in a marriage, that could be with a coworker, that could be with a neighbor, a family member, an extended family member. We can have toxic relationships. How we model our interactions with them is then trickles down to our kids. That's what they think they deserve because they're seeing their parent who they love so much suffer through a toxic relationship. So be mindful. What is your relationships look like? And your kids are watching. So practice self-care. Practice boundaries. If you need help having some of those boundaries, maybe you don't know where to start, find a local therapist. You can even go online and find tons of resources out there about taking care of yourself, having boundaries, and making sure that you have healthy relationships around you. Next one, and I love this particularly, is don't try to be both parents. Okay, friends, this is big. Because I try to do this sometimes because my husband always feels a little uncomfortable having some of those harder conversations. But the reality is we need other genders, other people speaking into our kiddos so that they can learn lessons that they need ultimately to grow and to be healthy adults. So don't try to do it all. Whether you're a single parent or you're in a marriage relationship, you can't be and you can't do it all. So invite other people into those conversations. I love the idea that we have trusted adults that we surround our kids with. So this can be guidance counselors, teachers, youth workers, youth pastors, even therapists surrounding them intentionally so that they can be spoken into by other adults that are preaching the same message that we give them, but that ultimately, potentially they can hear in a different way. So don't try to do it all. Allow other people to help you and speak into your kiddos as well. And then finally, the last point, if you are a single parent and maybe your heart is desiring companionship again, make sure that you are not pursuing a dating relationship to find completion. This goes across the board for those that are married already. Maybe you're single but haven't been married yet. Your married partner, your future spouse, will never complete you. In fact, you are already whole because of you are a created being in the image of God. That's who you are. That's your identity. That will never change. But too often in our worlds, I think it's this projection that if I get into a relationship or if I'm married, I will find contentment, happiness, and joy. Well, the reality is you are partnering with someone that's just as fallible as you are. So it's work. It is not complete freedom. So be mindful. What is your motivation in dating again? What are you looking for? Robert pointed out that his values changed. When he started looking at his future and being in a relationship and potential marriage, he was looking for some different values than he did previously. So assess that for yourself. Figure out what are my goals? What is the direction I'm going in? And then maybe connect with that person in a way that sparks some of those interests, that you start discussing a little bit more about not only yourself, learning more about yourself, but learning about more what you want. So remember, you are already made complete. You are already whole. Another person, yes, is an additive and it's beautiful, but it doesn't fit you in a way that it makes you designed as a whole person. Okay, I hope those takeaways were valuable for you. I hope those are things that you can implement even today. Thank you, listeners, for joining me today on my podcast. We have a lot of exciting interviews coming up, so be sure to tune in again next time for another amazing edition of Embracing Your Season.